Hello and welcome to Furious Driving, and today I'm driving an astonishingly rare Italian family hatchback. Yeah, this is a Fiat Brava. It's a 1.6 SX 16 valve and it's an automatic, which makes it, I believe, one of the rarest of all examples. Well, let's have a little fling around the countryside to see what we think. So we'll have a quick word from our sponsors while you hit like and subscribe, and then on with the review. Furious Driving, proud to be supported by Diamond Bright, protecting, cleaning and caring for the Furious fleet and for yours, with 10% off using code FD10. Bidding Classics, the online classic car marketplace with more cars added every week. And Lancaster Insurance cover the Furious fleet. They are one of the biggest specialist insurers in the UK, covering all areas of vintage to modern classic cars and motorbikes. Follow the links in the description below. So this is a Fiat Brava. When did you last see one of these? Or lop off the two back doors and turn it into a three-door hatch? Fiat Bravo. So let's take a quick look around it, because it is a fascinating looking car. It's what happens when designers are allowed to kind of do whatever they want, let their imaginations run free. So although the rain is kind of hiding it right now, there's a lot of stuff going on with this design, not least this incredible colour, which is absolutely gorgeous. And in fact, across the 3 and the 5 door designs and the trim levels, there were a lot of unique colours that were specific only to a certain number of doors or a certain trim level to make the thing even more stand out and different. So as you can imagine, finding replacement parts is a nightmare. So let's start at the front and have a look at what they did with this thing. Now bear in mind, they went straight from the Barchetta and the Coupe, which are both standout, stunning cars, into this, which was replacing the Tipo, which had been around for quite a few years by that point. Now Peter Davis, the design director at Fiat, said they wanted to design something without limits. Effectively, just let their imaginations run free. So they've got this lovely little pointy, squinty front end and this beautiful wraparound curving design. If you've seen the Fifth Element, a lot of the future cars from that seem to have taken some inspiration from this. The design work actually occurred in 1992, and you can really see the early 90s sleek, curvy aeroness of it, which on a lot of American cars became quite big and bulbous, but on here it's just really sharp and looks incredible. We've even got these little gullies here in the bonnet, left and right, which obviously adds strength to the panel, but add visual interest to it as well. This wraparound bumper, a space of fog lights down here on higher spec models. This is only an SX, mind you. Moving around the side, and we can see it's a very low front end, so good aerodynamics just there, and lots of curves down the flanks of the car. So lots of inherent strength in the panels, so good for noise and vibration and harshness and that kind of stuff, but also interesting to look at. The light plays down the side of the car in an interesting manner. Now, as I say, this is the Brava, which is a 5-door family car. The 3-door hatch was very different from the back. Now, a real standout feature of the Brava are these incredible tail lights, these triple slashes like claws have been around the back of the car and let the light run free, and coupled with that, this huge high-level brake light. Now, high-level brake lights were still a relatively new and novel thing in the mid-90s when this came out, and so this great big huge element, which, if this isn't LED, it's just dozens of tiny incandescent bulbs tucked inside there, make it look really interesting. There is a wiper on the back, of course, although this one is a little bit stuck, and you've got a nice big handle for opening the boot. Well, no actual button. You have to either use a key or a tag inside the car, which is curious. And then a typical Fiat Alfa thing of the 1990s, you'll see this on the Alfa 145, 146, 156, 147. The number plate is down here in the lower part of the bumper, so the back of the boot is left unencumbered and can just be pretty on its own without having the big, ugly plastic or metal lump stuck in the middle of it. Just get it down there, put the reflectors down there. Actually, reflectors integrated into the rubbing strip, interestingly. Let's have a quick look inside the car, because it's raining quite a lot now. Now, you'd expect a family car to have a fairly decent boot, and this does not disappoint. It goes back this far, and it's this wide. So it's actually quite a decent space. My big camera bag, other bits and things are in there, all fine. You've got a little courtesy light just down here. You've got lash down points for strapping stuff down. Interesting, there's a little slot in the side of it, which means your instruction manual handbook can tuck in there and be safe and where you need it to be. The back seats fold, it's a 60-40 split on that, and underneath the carpet you've got actual space saver spare wheel and toolkit, so you're not going to get stranded by this car if you get a flat tyre somewhere, which is fabulous. Better than a new car, really. Right, the rain isn't getting better. Let's have a look around at this cabin, and it is a really cool and interesting place to be. Typical 1990s Fiat Centro Stilo wacky design, lots of interesting curves, shapes, patterns and colours. We'll start off with the door on the passenger side, it's easy to see. We've got this amazing tweedy, it's like an impressionist flower meets early Space Invaders computer game pattern. If you look back to the 1970s line art space exploration games, these shapes look very much like that. And there's a more advanced version of it here on the seats themselves, which look absolutely fantastic. These kind of patterns, these abstract impressionist patterns with the muted pastel colours, they were so cool and trendy in the 1990s and early to mid 90s especially. Just look at any old photos of people and the ties they're wearing. It's all this kind of stuff. Looking back now, it looks a little bit like your grand sofa, but it is still ultra cool in this car. I kind of love it a lot actually. It's really nice. And it's this lovely hard-wearing tweed. The fabric barely wears at all. On the driver's side, the bolster has squished down a little bit inside the foam, but the actual fabric itself is completely undamaged. On the door itself, we've got a fairly substantial armrest, a big solid plastic door pull, electric windows, both driver and passenger on the driver's one. Lovely curvy shaped door handle. We've got the main speaker down there, the mid-range, and we've got a decently sizable door pocket as well, which is all good. Moving up to the top, we'll start with the T-shelf because it is quite an interesting place to look around in this car. First of all, we have got curiously domed shaped tweeters here in the top, lots of curves. Everything is a curve. It's like Teletubby land up here. Top of the dashboard binnacle just there, and then this air vent area here, like on the Alfa 1, 4, 5 and 6 actually. We've got this huge vent which blows up to the windscreen, very visible indeed, and I've got a separate panel in itself. And finally we have an area of T-shelf where we can locate our cup for drinking joy. Sadly not a place you can use when the car is in motion, but at least we've got somewhere for something when we stop and film reviews of the car. Swinging back across, we've got decent sized air vents here in the corners and likewise in the centre where you can move them up and down and left and right. Lovely kind of rubbery textured, like a little tractor tyre to move these things around. And just above that, this incredible radio. This is back in the 90s. I've mentioned this before. Car radio theft was a huge thing, so making uniquely shaped radios became a deal that manufacturers did quite a lot in order to deter theft. Also around this time they kind of decided and thought, well, you know, if we're going to make weird shaped radios, let's make them really interesting and integrate them into the dashboard rather than just a square block. Let's do a thing with it. And this is one of those things. And this particular one, it's FM radio, it's a cassette player behind this. This should pop up, but I can't make it pop up right now. I don't want to force it. This also says it's got CD changer control, but I've hunted around and I haven't found the CD changer yet, which is a shame. But this is actually quite a decent radio. It's a 6-speaker system. 2 in the doors, 2 in the dash, 2 in the rear parcel shelf. So all to the good and a lovely shape. Moving across to the binnacle is a cool intersecting semicircle design. So the speedo is this one full rainbow of speed. The rev counter bisects it slightly, redlining at 7,000 or 6,500 RPM, which is pretty brisk. Fuel gauge on the left, temperature gauge on the right. But I just love this little multi-line design with the little arrows actually cut into the lines. It's a beautiful bit of, well, I'm quite typography here actually rather than car design. Lovely stuff. And the steering wheel is a typical kind of hard rubbery thing that you'd be familiar with in 90s Fiats. Has got an airbag though, and we have got the horn to be tootling. Oh, that's quite a dignified parp for an Italian family car. I'd expect more of a high-pitched, get out of my way kind of a thing. But no, this is nice. Interesting little bits of sculpting on here again. All these curves and lines. This is so 1990s. I absolutely love it. There's one little curved line coming in here like an eyebrow. The other one cutting across it in front. So it's just pretty little shapes and lines everywhere. Even the bezel that goes around the dials is a big curved plastic thing. Lots more sculpting than it strictly needs. And we've got our adjusters for headlamp level and brightness of the display. Here is just more of these big rubber tyres in the front of that. Between the two we have got big chunky stalks for indicators and lights on one side and wipers on the other. And they have these tactile rubbery pads on the end which make it easy to use even if you've got wet slippery hands from the rain. I should also just mention quickly the mirrors. It does have internally adjustable mirrors, but only manually when you're right next to it. No electric stuff for you, young man. And now moving down, there's nothing down here on the footwell side, but back in the centre we have got our HVAC controls. We've got heat, direction and power. No air conditioning, but just check out, again, the little lines all around the heat control. This is the same kind of graphic design as on the Speedo, so it's a nice bit of joined up, continuous thought through the car's design. Underneath that we have got a huge flappy down area, and this is where we find the ashtray and the 12-volt socket, which is great because it keeps it all lovely and concealed and smooth and integrated. A bit annoying though, when you do actually want to charge your phone on a long journey, or any journey at all, you do have to have this whole ashtray area open. And if you've got a sizable USB adapter, it does clonk into the gear shift when it's in park. Now underneath that we've got a little cubby area for sweets, treats, chocolates and whatever have you, and behind that, less impressively than the chocolate area, we've got a massive chunky, like a dinosaur's leg bone, automatic gear shifter. And the automatic gear shift itself is fairly unimpressive, but what is impressive is the way that the plastic cover that sits over here to stop things falling down into the gearbox itself moves like an armadillo shell. It's lots of little pieces of plastic that slide back and forth. The other thing you might be hearing there is that terrifying "you're in gear" beep. Works in forwards and backwards sometimes, mostly in reverse though, and the first time I heard it, it just scared the bejesus out of me. I don't know what was going on. Behind that we've got two buttons, Sport and Ice. Sport means it just holds it in gear until the engine is about to put its valves and tappets through the bonnet. Ice very much does the opposite of that. It starts you in second, I believe, and it just dulls down the responses so you're not just skidding around quite so much. Proper old, good old school manual handbrake. And check this little ashtray in the back for the rear seat passengers. Another cool little curve thing that just vanishes into the console. Really cool, love it. Up above we have got an electric sunroof. I'm not going to open that right now because yeah, it's damp out there. But looking at the condition of the runners and things up there, I'm going to assume that works absolutely fine. We have got grips. We've got a really cool little light. Actually, this is a real basic version of the light that's in the Rover 75, curiously. Turn on. There we go. If you've seen the courtesy light in a Rover 75, it's this kind of sci-fi spaceship shape, but much more curvaceous and interesting. This is a very basic version of that, but I'm here for it. Okie dokie, I rushed into the back of the car to kind of get a feel of what it's like back here. The bench sits very high indeed actually, so you are kind of looking over the top of the headrest in front of you, so you do have a nice view out of the car, although it does mean my head is actually touching the ceiling. But I've got a ton of leg room, loads of room for my knees. My feet aren't squished underneath that chair either, which is great, and you've got a nice little pocket on the back of the front seat, so you can put your bits and bobs down there, and a door pocket as well. Only manual windows here in the back on the SX model. Same big chunky plastic door handle here in the back, and we have got three seatbelts arrayed neatly just down here. Not actually got a armrest in the middle, but check out these rear headrests. They are limo spec, aren't they? Like giant pillows. Headroom, I have to admit, is a little bit tight back here, but what is quite an interesting space is this huge area behind the back seats on the parcel shelf. Because that's a really shallow rear window, so this whole area is very low, but very light indeed. In fact, there's a lot of glass in this car, and the whole thing does feel really light, airy, and actually quite welcoming, actually. It's a nice car to be in. Right, let's take this thing for a drive, because that's what you want to see. Now the steering wheel is a typical kind of hard rubbery thing that you'd be familiar with in 90s Fiats. Has got an airbag though, and we have got the horn to be tootling. Oh, that's quite a dignified parp for an Italian family car. I'd expect more of a high-pitched, get out of my way kind of a thing, but no, this is nice. Interesting little bits of sculpting on here again. All these curves and lines, this is so 1990s, I absolutely love it. There's one little curved line coming in here like an eyebrow, the other one cutting across it in front. So it's just pretty little shapes and lines everywhere. Even the bezel that goes around the dials is a big curved plastic thing, lots more sculpting than it strictly needs. And we've got our adjusters for headlamp level and brightness of the display. Here is just more of these big rubber tyres in the front of that. Between the two we have got big chunky Between the two we have got big chunky stalks for indicators and lights on one side and wipers on the other. So I say big and chunky, and these all and they've got these, damn it, and they have these sort of tactile rubbery mats, and they have these tactile rubbery pads on the end which make it easy to to use even if you've got wet slippery hands from the rain. I should also just mention quickly the mirrors. It does have internally adjustable mirrors, but only manually when you're right next to it. No electric stuff for you, young man. Right, let's take the Brava for a drive. Fires up nice and easy. Clunk it into drive, and away we go. There will be fewer external GoPro shots on this drive today because it's just so wet. The lenses are going to get soaked, so we're going to have to be limiting that a little bit. Right, off we go. The automatic thingy-majig shifting through the gears in its own time. At this point, because we're accelerating uphill, I'm not sure what mode we're in. I can't find an indicator light. Oh yeah, there is an indicator. It's just very, very dim down there. It says norm for normal, because in this little LCD at the bottom, there is a display showing what gear you've put into. I've put it the sport button. Sport comes up and we change down, we rev quite a lot more and don't go any faster. It's just using more petrol for the same speed. So that's good. Now on the road, the car feels amazingly steady. People have criticised its low speed ride quality, and I will admit it is a little bit loud and not bumpy or crashy exactly, but it's not feather smooth. That's quite a puddle. On dual carriageways and motorways and things, it does cruise very, very smoothly and quietly. Now Fiat were really good at platform sharing with their own cars and making very, very different cars all from the same basis. This is a bit like what British Leyland did back in the 70s, but instead of just building an identical car and changing the badge, they built entirely different cars on the same platform. So the Type 2 was the most notable one, otherwise known as the Tipo platform, which gave us the Fiat Tipo, obviously. It also gave us the Alfa 145, 146, 155, GTV, Spider, Lancia Delta, Fiat Coupe. Have I said things twice already? I think there's a couple more Fiats in the mix as well. But anyway, that was a big favourite of theirs for a long time. But then they replaced that with the Fiat Type C platform, which is what this is based on. And this gave us the Brava, the Bravo, the Multipla and the Mireia, among other things. If you're curious what other platforms they were doing at the time, there was also the Type 2 Reversion 3, which is what the 156 was based on. It was a extended architecture with completely different suspension. And this car was an interesting development because, as well as being two different body styles with the 3 and the 5 door, they gave two different designers the job of coming up with the 3 and the 5 door body styles, which is quite unusual. Although perhaps not at Fiat and Alfa, because they did a similar thing with the 145 and 146. So the 3-door hatch was designed by a guy called Peter Fassbender, and the 5-door, which we're sat in right now, designed by a chap called Mauro Basso. But it wasn't just the exterior design that was different. Because they wanted to make the cars separate identities, it was actually advertised as the choice. So the 3-door was engineered to be a more sporty, more engaging drive, whereas the 5-door, being more of a family-orientated thing, was engineered to be a more softly sprung, more comforting car to be in, more comfortable. So you had a choice. You could have yourself sporty 3-door hatch, or you could have comfy family car. But either way, you've got discs at the front, drums at the back, and independent suspension all round. So the thing does actually grip and handle not bad, even though it does roll quite alarmingly through corners sometimes. It is actually quite controlled. And there's even a range of brand new engines for the car as well. There's a 1.4, this 1.6, a 1.8, and ultimately there was the 2-litre 5-cylinder 20 valve. And their power ranges went from a not too exciting 80 horsepower for the 1.4 up to a pretty alarming 147 for the 2-litre. Here in the middle with the 1.6 16 valve, we've got just over 100 horsepower and a 0 to 60 time of about 11 seconds. If you go to the 1.8, it drops to about 10 seconds. Later on into production, they actually extended that when the new 1.2 or 1247cc Punto engine came out. They adopted that for a new entry-level engine for this as well, so you could have it with a 1.2. There were also a pair of 1.9 TDIs if you wanted to go down that route as well. This was a very popular car across Europe, and in fact, when it was launched in 1996, it was European Car of the Year, or technically Brava-Bravo Cars of the Year, which I think is a fairly unique experience. Now, this was a big seller for Fiat, but not here in the UK typically. They actually built it in 2 plants in Europe, at the Lazio plant in Italy and also in the Tichy plant over in Poland. They also built it in Turkey and in Brazil, and in those places it carried on to 2003. But it got great reviews at the time. Jeremy Clarkson described it as how an ordinary car ought to be if you put some effort into it. He went on to say that it was a fun and engaging car in a way that its rivals at their time, it would have been the late model Escorts and things like the Astra, just weren't. And the styling and design just really make it stand out from the crowd in a way that its rivals just couldn't. That Italian flair, even in a 1.4 or 1.6 litre family hatch, it's here. It's a car that gets looks. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this ride out in the Fiat Brava, Car of the Year 1996. Now, the gearbox is a typical 1990s slosh-o-matic that kind of slithers from gear to gear with not a huge amount of feel or regard for the speed of the car or anything else like that. But it does the job, and if you want an automatic gearbox, it's absolutely fine. Judging by some of the comments I had on the video about this car a couple of days ago, yeah, apparently it's a better bet in terms of longevity, because a few people have mentioned that they've had broken manuals fairly repeatedly and fairly often, in fact, so that's not necessarily a great thing. In terms of reliability and longevity, these cars are actually really quite good. There's not a lot that goes wrong with them. Surprisingly for a Fiat, they've got a terrible reputation, but in actuality, they are quite good. And I think harking back to the days of the Tipo platform, the only real issue is going to be rust, normally down in the sills and the arches. This has had a small amount of rust just in the tail end of the sills, but that's been repaired by someone who's quite a good and conscientious welder, so that shouldn't be a recurring problem on this car, hopefully. Ergonomically, as a place to be, it's actually a really nice car as well. You've got a huge glass area, making it very comfortable indeed to be in. So you've got a lovely light and airy, not constrained feeling to it. The dashboard kind of moves away from you, so that feels nice and big as well. There's no passenger airbag, but there's a driver's airbag. And the steering wheel, although it's only like a rubbery plastic thing, is a nice size to hold, and the texture in it is quite nice. Everything is well laid out and just feels good. There is an issue that a lot of 90s plastics and rubbers do kind of go a bit yippy and sticky after a while. So far, this car is immune to it on the inside. On the outside, the door handle, little rubber insert parts have gone a bit weird, which is a tad odd, but that's 90s rubber for you, unfortunately. And the ride is actually rather nice. People have commented on older reviews that at low speeds the ride's not as perfect as it could be, a little bit jittery and harsh, and I think it's probably a fair criticism. It's not like Jaguar smooth when you're doing sort of 35-40 miles an hour, but at speed on dual carriageways, motorways and the like, it's actually very comfortable indeed to be in. I've now put, well, 111.1 miles, 1111 on the odometer in this car, and I've actually really enjoyed all of it. The seating position is actually excellent. The height is adjustable and the seat is actually very supportive. It's not as soft and squishy as, say, the Rover 75, but it's a long way short of the hardness of a Vauxhall chair. You know, altogether, I'm actually really quite enjoying this car. It's really interestingly designed as well. A car that looks good as well as handling well. You've got something that's a really fantastic machine. It's just an absolute crying shame there are so few of them left. This is the kind of car, and especially in this fabulous colour, if you were to rock up at Festival Unexceptional, you would have a crowd around the car all day, because no one would have seen anything like it for a very long time. And as I say, this platform did lend itself to other bigger cars. So there was the Marea, which was effectively a saloon and an estate version of this exact same car. You may remember back at the NEC last year, me and Ian from Hubnut borrowed a Marea weekend from Also Driven, and we both really liked it. That car was nominally originally for sale at the time because they were thinking of parting with it, and I was actually considering making them an offer to swap my Rover 400 for it. I'll be honest, I kind of preferred the Rover because it was a bit more of a dynamic, sharper drive, but this whole Fiat dashboard was so much more modern. Considering there was 2 years in between them, it felt a decade apart. The Rover felt like a really old car in comparison to the Fiat, which is quite interesting. And of course it also gave us the Multipla, which is the mad 6-seater 3 abreast big people carrier, so it was a really versatile platform. Of course, that all went out the window when this car was replaced by the Fiat Stilo, a car which is even more forgotten than this, even though it's a newer vehicle. So thank you for watching. Hit like, subscribe, all that kind of gubbins, and I'll see you again next time, driving something completely different.